Praise! Another good horror movie. K-Dog's movie review. Heretic is directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods and stars Hugh Grant, Sophie Thatcher, and Chloe East. Two young religious women are drawn into a game of cat and mouse in the house of a strange man. All right, I'm going to be short and sweet and get right to it. This is a great horror movie. As I said in my intro, this movie is about two young women from the Church of the Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as Mormons, visiting different households, trying to convert those who are interested in learning more. One of those interested people is, in fact, Hugh Grant. So these two young women enter his home, start talking a bit about faith, and then stuff happens. It's a horror movie. At the very end of this video, I will be discussing a major spoiler, so just be on the lookout for that. I will have a, spoiler section rating before that happens. I'll start off by saying this. The acting in this movie is phenomenal. Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East play these two young religious women incredibly well, each with their own personalities and backstories, which are more realized as the movie goes on. But nonetheless, they show that same commitment to the faith and the desire to convert others and have discussions about their God. And my God, Hugh Grant, or Hugh Mungo Grant, carries this movie as a humongous force of nature. He's in about 95% of the scenes in this movie, and every time he's on camera, I absolutely loved it. He's so great at putting on that nice, warm British charm, letting these two young women into his home and starting conversations with them, feeling so warm and gentle. But as the conversation goes on and things ramp up in the story, he puts off just enough of that unease to make you feel realistically uncomfortable. Now, I will say this is not your typical horror movie. This isn't your typical Nun Part 7 with jump scares every 5 minutes and scary images constantly thrown at the screen with loud noises. Yes, there are loud noises in this movie, and there are a couple jump scares, but this is more of a psychological horror. This is a breakdown of religion, essentially. These characters throughout this movie are having a conversation with one another and playing, as I said in the intro, this cat and mouse game where Hugh Grant is challenging these two young women and their beliefs. So what you really need to do with this movie is really sink in that atmosphere and invest yourself in the dialogue of the story, because my God, the dialogue is great and the acting makes it even better. The tiny nuances in people's faces as they react to certain words or actions of our other characters are just phenomenal. These two young women are on edge from the very beginning, entering the home of this older man. And so the movie plays with that and the certain interactions they have between each other. Hugh Grant is really charming on the surface, but maybe he's being too charming. Everything seems okay, but that one expression he had just seems a little off. Maybe we should leave. And that again is what really makes this a cat and a mouse horror. I absolutely loved it. The story is simple, but it kept me engaged with the dialogue and the acting here. This isn't your typical 3-act structure. I feel like the first 80% of this movie is all kind of one seamless scene. It's just a different way of experiencing the movie. And that first 80% of the movie, I absolutely loved. I loved the direction. I loved the look of Hugh Grant's house, the storm brewing outside, making you feel very locked in and claustrophobic. I highly recommend seeing this in a movie theater because the sound design is also on point. There are a lot of door creaks and sounds as characters make our way through this complex but claustrophobic house. As for score, it didn't really leave an impact on me, but that's not a bad thing because, again, this movie is pretty much set in this one guy's house, and it's very dialogue driven. You have the sounds of the storm outside, the sounds of the house itself, and the sounds of our characters talking. What's so great about our characters and their discussions is that they feel pretty realistic. A lot of times in horror movies, you really have to suspend your disbelief. You have to say to yourself, you know what, shit is going to go crazy. A big scary clown from outer space is going to come down and eat these children. I just have to enjoy the ride and for what it is. But with this movie, it feels pretty grounded. With the exception of some stuff in the third act, which I won't get into, no spoilers, feels like real discussions and does a great job of manipulating even the audience of thinking one way or another. And as for scares, the first 60% of this movie is pretty terrifying if you really put yourself in the position of these two young women entering this older man's house. Beyond that, it's not so much scary as it is anxiety inducing. There are, however, a couple scares that worked really well for me. So overall, I would highly recommend this movie. First, because it's different. A24 is so good at pumping out these creative projects with writers and directors who have an actual vision. So even though it's not necessarily my most favorite movie of the year, it definitely does a lot of things really well and kept me engaged throughout the entire runtime. Hugh Grant is fucking scary as hell and also weirdly charming at the same time. The dialogue, almost Tarantino-esque at times, is very intoxicating, and the scares, while overall minimal, are very effective. The third act lingers a bit, but that was fine with me. I overall enjoyed this movie a lot and would put it on my top list for horror this year. All right, spoiler section. You've been warned. So there is a lot to talk about behind this movie. The one thing that I did want to mention was at the end, and I wanted your guys' opinion on this. So in the end, Hugh Grant proves himself to be a crazy person who likes to manipulate people into thinking one way and caging a bunch of women that he sets up as these prophets, basically tricking any missionary type people who come into his home. One of our two sisters, I forget their names, it doesn't matter. She gets her throat sliced. She's dead. It's fine, whatever. The other sister ends up stabbing Hugh Grant in the throat, and she gets stabbed in the stomach. So they're both sitting there in the basement of Hugh Grant's house, slowly bleeding to death. Now, right before our sister that's alive is stabbed by Hugh Grant in the throat, as he's also dying, the other sister has one bout of life in her left, hits Hugh Grant across the face with a board with nails in it. He's dead. After she hits him in the head, she dies. The sister, who was only stabbed in the stomach, is able to slowly get up and find her way out of the house and into a field. Now, this is what I wanted to ask you guys about. The final shots of the movie are her holding open her hand and seeing that a butterfly is there, reflecting earlier on in the movie when she was talking about when she dies, she wants to be a butterfly that lands on someone's fingertips. We then get another cut to her looking out at her hand and nothing being there. Now, my assumption was that she actually died in that basement with Hugh Grant. Earlier in the movie, they discuss near-death experiences or what's happening to your brain as you start to pass. I'm guessing that's what happened to our main character at the end of the movie. I'm guessing that she did get stabbed by Hugh Grant in the throat. Her brain tricked her into thinking that she was actually saved in the end and she got out and was able to see the butterfly as those final moments of life drifted from her body. I really wanted to know what you guys thought about that ending. Did it really happen, or did she hallucinate at all? Please let me know your thoughts on that and overall what you thought of this movie in the comments below. Till next time.